No matter whether it's you're in a personal capacity or work capacity or in product development, look at your failures as the golden nugget to everything.
Our guest today is Professor Jason Laing. A little ooh wouldn't be inappropriate. Thank you. We met about 3 years ago,
Yeah.
I think, at an event by Bruntwood, and we got chatting in the pub, and just Gemma and Jason are just two of the nicest people you'll ever meet. They've sort of got that infectious.
You got paid to say that.
They've got that infectious personality, and you kind of like. And we must have talked for hours. I don't know. I was just like, wow. Well, that's why we're hammered now. But so it was just such a brilliant time. And when we were thinking about inspiring stories and all that sort of stuff, then Jason immediately springs to mind. He's got an amazing story which we'll get into. He's done so many things, but I think one of them that you should know is I credit Jason with being the first person to give me COVID. Because it was during, that event was during, not lockdown, but, you know, pandemic stuff.
I think like 80% of the people that came down with COVID.
Yeah, and I think you gave everyone COVID. So, anyway, we'll get into this, but just want to set this up by saying I think it's an amazing story. And Jason isn't necessarily what we might consider a traditional creative, but my gosh, he's creative, and I think that'll come out loud and clear. So, Jason, why don't you give us a bit of backstory? So, growing up, I know you had like this massive passion for cycling. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I'm originally from South Africa, from Johannesburg, and one of the things that, you know, it's not like the UK, we got a lot of public transport, so at a very young age, at about the age of 8 really, I started cycling to school already on my bicycle, and I realized, well, this could be quite fun, and I started seeing other people. Cycling was starting to develop quite a bit in the country, and I thought, well, let me see what I can do with this. And then my brother got involved, and before we knew it, by the age of 9, or a year later, I started entering into cycle races, and then by the age of 10, I was now starting to compete on international races, and I think, I had just turned 11 years old when I did my first 120 kilometer cycle race, and by the age of 21, I had already done 10 of them. So that I think there's 7 of us that hold the record that have done this. It's called the Argus Cycle Tour in Cape Town, and there's only a handful of us have actually done 10 by the age of 21. But it grew from there. But by the time I was 16, I became an elite cyclist. I was actually a sponsored rider. My brother and I were one of the top 3 tandem riders. For those who don't know, tandem is both you on one bike, screaming down a hill like 120 k's an hour like lunatics. But that's what we do. I came to realize at that stage that I might have the legs, but I don't have the brain, because anybody that wants to ride those distances has got to have a screw loose. Really has to. Especially in South Africa, being like 32 degrees, 35 degrees. Some days you're standing there and you're getting scorched. So that's where my cycling career started. So yeah.
And it was in cycling where you talk to us a bit about that, because behind that you've got dreams of Olympics and things like that, right? Yeah. But you also were smart enough to think, I need a backup plan. Yeah.
Look, I mean, it's one of the things that, I mean, you probably see it on shows on TV, and even just recently the Tour de France, is if a guy has a bad crash, that's his career done. It's like a musician, you're over. So my father said that there's no ways that I'm just going to be riding bicycle the rest of my life, that I need to do something. And I drove my family crazy, because all I want to do was ride bicycle. And so they said, we're not even sending you to university. You're just going to go get a job. You're going to go do something, because you've got too much energy, and that's what you do, right? So I ended up studying to become a jeweler and diamond dealer at night, while I rode bicycle during the day. And through that, obviously I learned a lot to do with 3D printing, and this goes back to 1996, before it all started, before we know it is today. So that's how it evolved, and I started using 3D printing for jewelry to make 3D printed jewelry items. Yeah. So,
Amazing. So it's in the world of cycling that your life then changes dramatically.
yeah.
Can you tell us about that? Do we have a
So
picture?
yeah,
of
I
the
think if
track looks like?
so you will see in the previous slide point of friction, right? So for me, that's a very pertinent point for me in everything I do. Is, take yourself right now. Anything that happens to you, you often left there questioning why. Why does thing happen to you? And for me, that is a very golden nugget in everybody's life, and I call that the point of friction. And that very moment will change your life as it stands. And whether you like it or not, you're going to change, but it comes down to your choice. So as you can see here, this is the Manchester Velodrome. So, but in South Africa, we had an outdoor track, a concrete track, and I was training for the South African Championships in March 2015. There's an event where you slipstream a motorbike at high speed, and on the last lap a bell goes and the motorbike comes off and you'll sprint to the finish. The bell went, and we started to sprint, and on the embankment on the right side over there, as we were coming around the corners, my forks on my bike snapped. And the problem with the track bike is those ones you strap to the bike, you can't actually take your feet out. I was riding a disc wheel on the back. You got no brakes. You can't freewheel. So when I went down, I didn't even have time to even put my hands out. I hit the deck straight on into the ground at just over 60 k's an hour. Can I have it next slide, please? And this is me fighting for my life. Right, I broke 32 bones in my body, collapsed both lungs, and had major brain injuries.
And you were dead.
Well, this is when they were putting me on life support and stuff. Yeah. So this is the last pictures my family took as this is where I was. I was done. I was out. I mean, they worked with me for over an hour at the track to try and keep me alive. They then managed to get the helicopter to land, but because where we were, they couldn't get the helicopter to land. They managed to package me and then transport me to one of the government hospitals. Collapsed again, and they put me onto support, and they kind of told my family I wouldn't make the next morning. And if I did, I'd be a vegetable for the rest of my life. Am I allowed to say that? Vegetable? Sorry. If it's not PC, I apologize, but that's just me. What can I say? So I was done as far as I was concerned, and the whole life after death experience and all that kind of thing was about to come my way. And that there is my point of friction to everything that's brought me to where I am at right now. Can I have a next slide, please?
Well, before we, so you're in a coma.
Yeah.
This one's going to be just after that.
Yeah.
But you're at this point you're in a coma.
Yeah.
Induced or just that?
Partially induced, yeah. But I mean,
And what's that? What is that period of time?
It was about 2.5 weeks there. So.
And if I remember rightly, this is a conversation 3 years ago. But you're aware of what's going on around.
When I was out like that, no. I was busy visiting the fairies up in the sky. You know what I mean? And but at that stage, no. I didn't even know where I was. The thing that you don't see there is that when I had the crash, my clavicle and parts of my shoulder broke through the skin and broke off. So, and I crushed all my ribs in my chest. So I had punctured all my lungs, and I was pretty much hemorrhaging probably from everywhere. So from this stage onwards, I was literally, I was on my way out. I was checking out really. So yeah.
So you come out of the coma.
Yeah.
What's the process?
So when I came out, I was in a state called semi-locked-in state. So I was now stuck in a body that just did not perform in my head. I knew I could hear everything, I could see everything. I was stuck in a body that just didn't present itself as to what it should be. So I would sit there and I could hear everybody talking around me, but I couldn't speak properly. I was mumbling. The words coming out of my mouth weren't the words I was trying to say. And I couldn't hold full sentences. I would forget things. It was just terrible. So, and you could see how my eyes would shake, my head would body twitch like this continuously. And this was at occupational therapy. You can see on my hands over there, the bones, when I hit the ground, the bones broke out through the skin. I couldn't really hold a word. You can actually see my eyes actually are like a bit of a grey colour. You don't actually, I'm trying to get a word up, but because my occupational therapist is talking to me now, I was like, mate, I can't tell you anything. What do you want me to say? can't do anything. It was like that continuously. It actually became a bit of a joke, really, because any time I got stressed or somebody cracked a joke, my eyes would go. So I was becoming like a bit of a bobblehead, you know what I mean? It was actually a bit of a laugh. So, and ironically, the people that were looking after me were from Yorkshire, from Leeds. So as British humour goes, they just would take the piss out of you, really. So it became a running joke. So they all come and crack a joke, and my eyes would go. So even today, it's still a bit of a joke. They're still testing to see if they get it to do it today, but it's just how it is, yeah.
So during that time when you can hear stuff going on, but you can't really interact with it, so you start to hear what the plans are for your body.
So the reason, now imagine this, now you're stuck in a body that you have no control over. You can't actually get it to function, you can't do things. So, and you can't even have a conversation with anybody. So it's like being stuck in on the other side of the road, right, and watching the world go by. If you have a look at the next slide, I think I actually put a picture. Like, this is what I felt like. I was like on the other side of the field, and that was the world over there. I was here, but I was trying to get over there. How do I get over there? And the only person that is going to be there with me is me at the end of the day. So I had to learn to become my own best friend. I had to learn to have my own arguments and lose them. I had to find ways of actually finding what is it that I have left in me that is actually tangible to be able to relay some form of information, like across, to the rest of the world. And it felt like I was back in the day where we had no telephones, you had like Morse code. You had to find ways to be able to communicate to the rest of the world. And I thought, well, at the end of the day, I need to know who I am now, because this body's not functioning. So what do I have left as skill sets? What do I have left that I can actually use as a way of explaining to people what's going on in my head, even though I can't speak? So a very deep dive search into myself. And I think it was, again, another point of friction for me, because many of us don't ever get to that point. We never get to the point as to we understand who we are. And then we were so bombarded with social media, and we were so bombarded by socialism around our people, and everybody's kind of intent as to what they want you to be, or what the expectation of what you should be, essentially. For me, it was a matter of like, if you understand who you are and you're comfortable with yourself, and it's probably a cliche saying about knowing who you are, really, but if you're able to understand that and you can stick to your grounds, your energy itself will be able to attract the right kind of people towards you. So what I ended up realizing is that because of the head injury, the amount of force I had taken to the brain, I now developed a thing called synesthesia. Now, if we can look at the next slide. So essentially what it is for me, I was an absolute plank at school. I was thick as bricks. I mean, and they made me drop maths when I was in, we call it standard 8, which is when you're about 16 years old. They said, this maths ain't your thing, and science ain't your thing, and maybe you should go do a little bit of art and typing and you'll be fine. And that's what they made me do. And I was an absolute plank. But now, because of the head injury, I now think pictures and numbers are my everything. Everything. If I can put a picture to a number, or a number to a picture, that's my sense of understanding what this world is about. To the point that when I'm constantly calculating, like I was explaining to you, like when I look at a cup, I'm constantly working out what size the cup is, how much water is in it, what is the density of the water. I'm constantly calculating these things all the time. It does my head in, but it has its benefits. So
we were obviously having this conversation in a bar. And so we're having this very lucid conversation, but Jason says, we're having this conversation, but my brain is calculating all the glasses on all the tables out here, how much volume of liquid is in all of them, and I'm calculating all of that. I'm like, I know you're accurate, and you've tested this out, and you're pretty accurate.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah,
right?
so like numbers, there's certain numbers that have a certain color to me, they have a certain feel to them. I can literally, like now, you can see I'm doing that, because I can feel the numbers as I'm thinking about numbers. And certain numbers almost have a taste to it. Like certain numbers will be like a juicy, like a tangerine orange, almost with a touch of an apple. Like number 5 is like really like that for me. It's like I can actually, like it's weird. It's the most bizarre thing. So I started realizing, okay, so I understand these numbers now. I understand pictures. I need to be able to find a way now to communicate with this. And now, having studied jewelry, studied 3D printing and CAD design, I realized I might not be able to speak, but put me in front of a computer, I might be able to start using the icons, which are pictures, numbers, to calculate what I wanted to do and actually start communicating with it. Now, one of the crazy things was, having been a jeweler, I ended up working. This is where I actually met Gemma. Her and I worked on ships together many years ago, and I ended up becoming did everything around the female lifestyle as far as product goes, from becoming a personal shopper. When I got back from the ships, I couldn't get a job as a jeweler because everything I was trained in didn't exist in the country. So I had to move over and take the skill sets of 3D printing, metallurgy, CAD design, and moved into maxillofacial reconstruction, so custom implants for people's faces that have had gunshots or car accidents or cancer. Now, when they said to me, like, when I started recovering, they said to me, because the way I had broken the shoulder so bad, they're going to have to amputate my arm at the shoulder. And I was like, hell no, no. Now, a lot of the work, obviously, rebuilding people's faces, and coming from Johannesburg, I mean, gunshots to the face are like it's like an everyday thing. That was a lot of my work, is rebuilding people's faces, utilizing the precision of jewelry and CAD work. So I told them, forget, I fix me. That's what I kept on saying, I fix me. So the surgeons that I used to work with put me down in front of a computer and said, well, if you're going to fix you, fix you. And I sat for 18 months designing my surgeries, designing my implants, making 3D printed replicas of myself, running them again and again in theatre to save the arm. You know, and that was the whole thing.
And part of the, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the problem here was the way you'd broken clavicle was wrapped around arteries and things like that.
Yeah,
so the surgery was so complex, but your brain wouldn't be able to withstand long surgery.
So because of the head injury, I couldn't be under anesthetic for more than 3 hours. The standard surgery just to kind of piece me back together, not even really fix me, was going to take between 16 to 19 hours. So the question is what do we do? Do we amputate or don't we amputate? The problem is, even if we amputated the arm, my subclavian artery and the artery from the aorta was all now mangled up in the shoulder here. So even if you amputated the arm, that still sits there. So if I fell and pierced that, I'm dead in seconds. So I'd spend the rest of my life waiting for that day where I kick the bucket. And after everything I fought for now, I thought to myself, if I'm going to die, let me do it on my own terms. At least give me the fighting chance to give it a go and to fix myself. And because of the work that we did with the maxillofacial surgeries and the rest of it, I had a good credibility behind me with a lot of the doctors and surgeons. So the surgeons said, well, we'll go into theatre, we'll do your surgery off the back of what you've done before with other patients. It's funny, again, how this all comes about, because it took us 18 months of planning, and it got to a point where I was starting to lose circulation in the arm, and it was going to be, we have to do something. We didn't have a choice. So it was a proper leap of faith. Thank goodness I was in South Africa, because that would never be allowed here in the UK with the regulations and the red tape. So, you know, they would have done I would have had to follow so many criteria. And being a third world country, you can go to a hardware store and hire a hammer, and if the doctor's willing to sign off, they can use it, kind of thing. I know that's extreme, but that's what it's like. So I made I 3D printed my own implants, made my own cutting guides. So we literally found a way to have special cutting guides that mounted up against my body, and the doctors would drill in place by numbers. Drill in, take off, drill in, put the next brace, drill in, and cut out. So it was all precisionally planned. Literally, and we'd run it again and again and again in theatre on the 3D printed replicas to make sure, did we have the procedure waxed? Like, every second counted. We couldn't waste. If a drill bit broke, we had to make sure we had the right drill bit next to it. So we mitigated all the human issues. So we did.
You had to get that under
3 hours. So I wouldn't get off the table, really. Or if I did, I'd probably end up not come off the table as a full box of chocolates, really, and the rest of my life would be back to where I started. So I remember the surgeons actually saying to me that day when I couldn't even really walk properly at the stage. I sat on the edge of the bed and they said, "Are you ready for this?" And I said to them, "No, today's a good day to die, because either way, I'm dead either way." You know, if it's either going to be either or. There's no in between. There's no grey area. And I'm just, you get to a point where you're just done. You know, you just don't want to do this anymore. And that's what we did. And we got the surgery done in just under 2 hours, and put the titanium implants in. We did all the bracings and put everything back in place. Put my scapula back in place, everything, and I got to keep the arm. I have about 80% use of the arm. I don't really have much feeling in the arm, but I got feeling in the parts of the hand. But here I am. I got to keep the arm and be able to go from there. So again, from that, crazy things happen, because...
Well, let's just take a moment to applaud that bit.
you know,
If that had been my story, we'd have like a standing ovation for a while. But it didn't stop there for you.
no. See, the problem was with having broken the bones through the skin and broken off, and I had broken all my ribs and the rest of it. There was an issue of that we couldn't graft bone anywhere to now put me back together again. So we said, well, what happens if we take something from the jewelry industry like silver particles and we make a bone paste that's conductive and we actually grow bone inside my body? You know, that's how brain damaged it was, right? So, so when I went to sat with the Medical Research Council guys, and I was like, this is what I want to do, they all looked at me and they even asked me, like, how bad was your head injury? Because this is like, you're freaking nuts. So we started working with a lab team in our capital in Pretoria, and we found a way to take bovine bone, extract all the cellulose out of it, take stem cells and nano silver particles from the jewelry industry. Obviously, we're refining it down, almost like colloidal silver, but a slightly bigger particle that's positively charged. Because the problem with stem cells, you've got to keep them alive at a certain energy form in order to be able to understand each other. Now, the problem with the shoulder is if you cut it here and you cut it here, you can't just bring it together, because we get a thing called a non-union where the bone doesn't actually bond, because it's got to speak the same language. So we had to find a way now to incubate my clavicle and parts of my shoulder and the cuff in the body and use me as an incubator, but while putting the titanium implants in that we've now 3D printed, which we did. And then after they put it in, we then put an external bone stimulator, which is electrical current pulsing. Because silver being conductive, we were able to speed up the rate of bone growth or knitting of the bone excessively in a huge amount. And to give an example, so I had the surgery on a Friday. I was out of a sling a week and a half later because the clavicle already started to knit, and that was about 3 centimeters long.
Wow.
So look, again, was it luck? Could it be done again? Maybe. I don't know. It's a leap of faith in that respect. But the fact is that we had found a way to incubate bone inside my body against a titanium implant, which is just beyond nuts, really. And I had to try everything. I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, if you got the choice between losing or keeping your arm and you had the ability to be able to change it, would you not take the trial? You would. And that's what we did, really. So, but again, I pushed the boundaries always. And I was actually cracking a joke with some of the surgeons and some of the teammates that I was working with. And I said, I'm like a big subwoofer, like a big speaker now, because I've harmonically tuned bone. I'm like electrically conductively made my bones. I can, when I walk, I'm like, like Robocop.
Beatbox behind you.
That's it. If I walk through anywhere, like I might just pick up like static sound or something, you know.
What are you like in airports?
Oh man. Yeah, it is rather. Sometimes I'm lucky, but not that one where you got to stand with your hands like this, and they're like, and I'm waiting for like. There's always an issue. Yeah. So during that stage, I cracked a joke saying I can harmonically tune bone, and this is what we could do. Before we knew it, the leading ENT surgeons in South Africa came to me and said, "Can you harmonically tune bone? Like, could you reverse engineer the ossicles, the 3 little bones inside your ear, so they can pick up harmonic sound?" Back to the number thing again. I realized, well, if I do the numbers correctly, because I can literally see the sound in my head with the numbers, I can actually find a way to match the density of the ossicles that we'll 3D print and work with to match the density of the person's bone in their own body. So it's on the same levels from a harmonics point of view. And what it led to was I think it was January 2019, not long before we met actually. We ended up doing the world's first 3D printed inner ear transplant, putting us in the same category as the first heart transplant in South Africa. And that's what it came out. But again, let me show you this. This is how, because of pictures and numbers, never done a Rubik's Cube in my life, all of a sudden I'm now starting to count as to which color's got to go where at what particular rate or which particular motion. And it got to a point of being able to do a Rubik's Cube in less than a minute. So what we did here was my mates took a cell phone, strapped it to my chest and put me on the table. So I couldn't really walk properly and couldn't really talk properly, but I was able to now quickly work with this. And yeah,
the next one we were trying to... So this is the world's first...
inner ear transplant, yeah.
Ear transplant.
Yeah. And that's what really catapulted me to getting here besides Gemma being the lovely lady she is from Manchester. This is what. Yeah, I'm the only person that can't find the front door because I can't remember where it is. So after this, we then obviously I got selected to come across with Loughborough University. We're going to do this inner ear surgery, and we're going to explore what we could do, because now we found a way to stop hard of hearing and hearing loss by literally changing the ossicles inside the ear. Came across, eventually got selected for the global talent visa, and that then it started to accelerate from there. And then we had a little event, and COVID kicked in, and deafness got shelved, and that's been a bit of a mission on that respect. So we realised, well.
And is this the advent of ProMake? Is this? This
was pre-ProMake. Yeah. This is where a lot of the information, a lot of the tech came about, because when we were doing the inner ear surgery, obviously I used silver and silver particles and all the rest again. We found that Manchester being the home of graphene. Are you all familiar with graphene? So we realised graphene's got a higher conductivity and all the rest of it. And after done the biological and biomolecular work here to make sure it doesn't get rejected, we then realized when COVID kicked in, we're sitting in a serious problem now. We can't do inner ear because all hospitals are shut. What are we going to do? So we said, well, let's take the graphene and find a way to bind it to materials, put it through our 3D printing machines, and what are we going to do from there? I then had to fly. All the lockdown was starting to happen, and all flights were being ground. I had to fly back to South Africa to go and hand my passport in on the new global talent visa. And when this all kicked off, I realized, well, we need to make something that can actually flip this business now on its head. And while I was on the plane, there was only about 50 of us on the plane going back to South Africa because no one was flying. I sat and back to the numbers thing again and started working out, how can I make graphene into a biosensor? And we all had that horrible event where you got to shove the swab up your nose and the back of your throat, and you're gagging and your kids are running away from you and the rest of it. We said, well, why don't we do a device that you actually just breathe into, like a handheld PCR machine? And so that's what we developed, and we got selected for a framework contract with the government here, and that accelerated us. And now we're going into preclinical trials of these new handheld devices that will be able to test for pathogens and viruses, all because I cracked a joke on how we can harmonically tune bone. So,
obviously,
like you do,
yeah.
So it's just, again, point of friction. Now, the thing is I could have sat there and wallowed in my own sorrows from my accident, or I could have sat there and felt like, well, why me? Why is this happening to me? But all I did was I sat there. This is a reason. There's something happening. What is the benefits from this? Not being so focused on the trauma of what's happened, but more on the focus of, what am I going to get from this? And what can I turn this into? What can I turn this into to be able to, understand a whole new realm of development? So I focused a lot on the failures. Like we did my surgery. We had to find not how it's going to work, but how it's going to fail. We had to find every way possible how it's going to fail. And we mapped that out completely. So there's a scenario called Benford's Law. So if you have a long algorithm, the chance of number one coming up is 30.1%. If you have a long algorithm and you stabilize them. Benford's Law is a way, everything down to cellular matter, everything from volcanoes to everything, the curvature of the volcano, it's all series of events that have a certain ratio to it. And that's also, the next slide, I'll talk about the golden ratio, is by combining these type of things, you can actually find, by searching through all your failures, no matter whether it's in a personal capacity or work capacity or in product development, look at your failures as the golden nugget to everything. Don't look at them and go, oh, it's not going to work, it's terrible, upset with yourself. Really look at it as the best thing that you could ever be given. Not the gains and the achievements you get, but more the failures. From that, you're now building up a scenario of the golden ratio and Benford's Law, where it's going and feel like you're going nowhere, going there. And then all of a sudden, it'll just do an opposite curve, and your gains will outdo the failures, because you built up a toolbox of all these failures that by your own personal thinking, it will change. And this is what I had to do with myself. Even with my planning my surgery, I had to find every way possible that we could fail, down to the point knowing how many times I would not make it off the table. We had to look at it. I'll be honest with you, that was like probably the hardest thing, of knowing every day, having to look at yourself saying, I might not get off the table. you know, and finding the reasons why you won't get off the table, and not the reasons how to get off the table, but more why you won't. And understanding that just changed everything for us. Yeah. So don't look at the failures as a negative, really.
Wow. I want to open it to the floor. Have we got any questions?
Have you written a book? I want to read it.
It's no, not as yet. No.
Are you thinking about it? Because I'd buy it.
Hey, cool.
Anyone want to write it? Any?
From the documentaries of
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on other types of synesthesia?
Sorry,
So the question for benefit of the camera is what are your thoughts?
On other types of synesthesia? I have a type as well, and I find it interesting that you have this. I don't have yours. I wish I did. That sounds awesome. You didn't have that before.
No.
And this has suddenly sort of changed your life.
Oh yeah.
Have you got thoughts on like how and where that comes from and what synesthesia is and all of that stuff?
Definitely, this, you know, for me, it's been the ultimate game changer. It's been a positive and a negative in many aspects. The positives was, like, before the accident, I actually used to wear hearing aids and I used to wear glasses. And we actually think the reason why I had the accident was because I couldn't actually hear my bike giving issues. And it was a carbon fiber bike, and we think also I couldn't hear the bell. So when the guys started sprinting, I went off like a rocket, and I might have not been the right thing, but hitting the ground, all of this and the injury to the brain, I got majority of my hearing back, and I haven't worn glasses since. I went from writing with my right hand to writing with my left hand, like I'd written with my left hand my whole life. Even the way I speak was totally different. My friends used to say, you're like a different person. It was like all weird things, like the foods that I didn't like before, I now eat. So the synesthesia side itself was definitely a benefit in respects of understanding all of this. So, but at the same time, it meant I understood, didn't mean everybody else understood it. And sometimes that's been a bit of a challenge, because when I try and explain things and Gemma has to dumb it down a bit, not that you don't want anything. Sure. Because I go too technical, and I go into this whole like content of science, and like we just wanted to know if it was a yes or no, you know. But I have met other people with synesthesia, from music to art to a whole range of things. It's, you know, it's you've been given a blessing in my mind, because it's something that you wouldn't get into any other way. Again, is it nature? Is it nurture? Because the way I say, like, you know, you're attracting energies, you're attracting the way you be, and becoming your own friend, you start to hang around the vibe that you attract, essentially, and that creates that energy, and that can uplift you or break it down. And the synesthesia seems to put into more content as to what you can become. So for me, it's amazing. I mean, it really is. I think it's the most amazing gift ever. I don't ever regret the accident. It's as hard as it's been. I'll do it 1,000 times over. It brings me to where I am right now. It's because of that, yeah.
Your vibe attracts your tribe.
That's it. I'm trying to find the word.
You're welcome.
There's another question, sir.
Yeah, I was going to ask you though, does it get noisy in there?
What, with the people talking in my head?
With just the all of the synesthesia and everything, like it,
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
It does become a problem. Sleep is not a good thing for me. In respects that I battle to sleep. It does. So we've had to do a whole range of things, from like CBD oils to you know, getting back on the bike and all the rest of it.
How was that?
It's been interesting, because in my mind I know it a certain way, my body goes, well, I'm going to ride a different way, and it's just, I've had to relearn everything again.
Was there a fear of getting back on the bike? Or
yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, initially there was. The biggest one was when I first arrived here and I went and looked at the Manchester Velodrome. It was the first time I'd stood next to a track since the crash, and that was harder than anything I can imagine, because it was a sense of returning, and it was a sense of coming to content. Because up until that it was all like, this accident happened, it was just all noise, but you don't really put into perspective until you come to a place that it brings it home, and that was hard. Mm-hmm. So then I got into a bike. I did 100 miles with the Royal Air Force not so long, about 3 months ago. 3-4 months ago to raise funds for disabled veterans, and it was it was a big soul search along the way, because the entire time I had to go through everything again in my head, and it does the things that gets noisy. Yeah.
There's a question there somewhere, Sarah.
My jaw is on the floor with this story. But I'm curious, because you've talked about the fact that your body has changed, physically you've changed, your brain has changed, and you've also had this incredible insight into, well, I say it's an insight, maybe you knew it before, this thing about energy. So I guess I'm curious to know whether, I don't know how you like to call it, your essence, your spirit, your energy, the you-ness that's not all the physical and the brain and all that kind of stuff, whether you feel that's different, or that's still kind of you, but it's grown.
You know where the defining line is that, when I showed you that picture of like sitting across the field and watching the world go by, it came to realize a point. It's a term that I heard some time back, is that you are not your body. You are not your body. And that was a defining moment for you, like, gosh, this is just a vehicle. So how big can I be? How big can I grow? And what can I be? And it was a very empowering moment for myself, but I couldn't tell anybody. So I embraced it, and it's come to realize is that you are not your body. And for me, it's a matter of nurturing that now. And was it part of it? Was it there before? I do believe so. I do believe part of it was there before. I just think we're so blinded by the tangibility of things, the tangibility of people and the ownership of stuff, that we've actually just forgotten to take ownership of ourselves. Be your own person. Be responsible. Take ownership. And that for me has been phenomenal as a learning growth. That's why I'll never regret having the accent, because that's one of the biggest things that's come about for me. Yeah. So, and again, it's like when you meet people, you either connect, and that energy is just, that's what I work on now. It's not, especially with Jim and I, when we run the business, we're all about, do we connect with you on an energy level, not on your product or your sales, or do we connect with you? That's what we nurture you, not the product.
Does it feel like you've got a rare talent, and do you ever feel like people are dismissive of your experience or what you can do now, because they maybe don't believe the ability that you've got?
Yeah, absolutely. People entertain you, but you can see clearly, I mean, again, going back to the whole energy thing, you just know people are just looking at you like, shame, he's a kind of special, you know. And they give you that smile. I get it all the time, but I feel like I cheated. I feel like I've cheated a lot of people that haven't had the opportunity or the benefit of the outcome that I've now got. So a lot of what I do now is I try and make sure that it's not a brag right, and it's not a gift like I'm better than anybody else. It's more like, how can I share this, and how can I help somebody else? Because I do feel like I cheated things in respects of cheated death, cheated the opportunities I've been given. Even though everybody says, oh, you should be grateful and be happy that you are. I am, don't get me wrong, but not everybody gets the opportunity. And there's friends of ours that had accidents that are less impactful than the ones I've been through, and they're worse off. And it's just, is it a reason? So obviously I do believe I came back to do something for the good, and that's the reason.
Fascinating question about the energy, by the way. Just going to build on that, you mentioned the point of friction, and the first time you said it, your eyes actually glared a little bit.
Yeah.
So the question really is that something that is now constantly part of you, or something that you pull in when you need it?
I'm constant. It's more of an awareness, should I say. So as the day goes on, you know, you kind of like catching and releasing throughout the day of things that you are doing and the people that you're coming into contact. And so I'm constantly aware of looking for nuggets, my point of frictions, big or small, whatever it is. What is it? And I build toolboxes from that. So it's an everyday thing for me. It's not necessarily when something just happens, but I'm constantly searching, you know, as my daily path, really.
I wonder, how do you feel about, do you think things would have been different if you'd have felt like the victim?
Definitely.
Because and this might be controversial, I don't know, but I think we're seeing a lot of social equity in victimhood, I think, where, and you'll have been in conversations with people like, oh, I've got this going on, well, I've got this going on. And you're like, oh, that wasn't what I wanted from you. But I think there is a kind of narrative of that going on. But it's interesting that, someone who perhaps might have had every reason to feel like a victim doesn't feel like you've approached it that way at all.
Again, there was a point of friction again, should I use that term, something that happened on a personal capacity. I had just gotten divorced 2 months before my accident. So I was hadn't finished going through everything yet. And if I look back now, it's just like, it's the most craziest time, because going through a divorce on its own is life-changing, and for many people, going through a breakup in a relationship or anything is difficult. The thing is that I had taken out kind of like death benefit policies and insurances and all the rest of it, which I had cancelled because I had been going through divorce, and it was all tied up in the rest of it. And a lot of people, when an accident happens or something happens to them, they sit there and go, oh, woe is me, and they become a victim, a contributor to their injury. And they sit there and go, okay, I'm just going to sit here and wallow and the rest of it. The fact for me that I had no choice now, because I had no source of income. My staff had to take over my business to be able to keep it alive. I literally got there and, I could sit here and feel sorry for myself and just end up just becoming more disabled by my own being, and and limiting myself by my own limitations, really. And I thought, I don't have a choice. So I refused to become a kind of an enabler to my injury, because I don't know whether it was more that I was just like refusing to accept that this has happened to me, or if I was still going through that stage of understanding the benefits of what I'm going to get from this. I was in that kind of flux scenario, but it was definitely a scenario where I've realized, and I go, as you're right, you go around everywhere and people are just victims, and you sit there and you go, what do you got to be so sorry about, And it's minuscule stuff. I mean, don't be a victim, don't.
Lee?
During that healing process, when you were in a coma, was there any level of or processes that you went through in terms of your self-talk? Was there any stages where you kind of decided, that you were really down, there was like really a lot of negative body talk, and when did it switch over to say, I can do this?
This might be like freaky kind of stuff now. Whether you believe it or you don't believe it, it's whether you're spiritual, you're not spiritual, or religious, whatever. This has got nothing to do with it. This just comes down to what happened to me. And like, my dad passed away a number of years back. And when I was 21, my best friend was killed in front of me on a motorbike, right? And my grandfather passed away. So all these people that passed in my life, right? When I had the accident, a lot of people asked me about the life after death or scenario, and I got to see my dad again, but it was the most weird thing. It was like as clear as day, but I could see him, but I couldn't see him. It's not like when you hear a voice in your head, you can hear the voice clearly, but you can't see the person, but you know it's the person. It's like that whole scenario. It was like that. My friend that died on the motorbike, my father, my grandfather, and another relative, all pretty much came to me and said, "This is what you're going to be." And at that stage, I was like, I'm done. I could see myself being like squished together, really, in the head blocks and all works. And I realized that I'm just not coming back. And I was choosing not to come back at that stage. And my father had a good chat with me, and he said, well, you can either go back and but you're not going to go back as you know it. It's going to be extremely difficult for like the first 2 years. And then things are going to change, and you're going to embrace life like you've never embraced it before. And my dad used to crack these jokes with me, and I was like, yeah, you're doing it again, But then my mate said to me, like, no, you have a choice. You can either go back or you can go. It's your choice. You're not bound to anything. That conversation in my mind must have gone on for a few minutes. but it was like 2.5 weeks. So it's like there was no time, there was no environment. It was like, and then I remember having a conversation, and next one I'm back at myself again, and then looking back and I'm seeing myself go with these like two shadow kind of, it wasn't even figures, it was just like strange shadows. And then all of a sudden I was back. And I was like, I didn't know whether I should be happy or ticked off, because I'm now in a body that doesn't work. Like, that was a sick joke. Like, you guys are sending me back and you tell me it's all gonna be great, but now it's a sick joke. I'm in a body that's not working. And that defining moment right there was like, okay, Dad said, it's gonna be an amazing, just bear with it. You'll find things and you'll evolve from there. And this is how it began. And those are the moments that when I realized, well, I need to go and search as to how to become my own best friend, how to find these things. Let me listen to what I'm hearing and not necessarily seeing, and it's evolved from there. So yeah. So I don't know if that helps answer the question, but that's kind of, whether you believe it or not, but that's just how that happened. I still, to this day, I still believe I can still connect on that side, and this is how I'm being guided in some respects, whatever that may be.
Love that. We're going to leave it there. I want to respect everyone's time. Thank you all for making it out here
Thank you.
this morning. And can we just thank both gentlemen? Thank you.